Good day, and welcome to Nurture for the Soul. I'm Reverend Dr. Aaron Wade, your host for today's webinar. I serve as the Minister for Congregational Leadership Development, Granting, and Scholarships on the Faith Education, Innovation, and Formation Team, which is often referred to in the United Church of Christ as the Faith Info Team. We are a part of the Justice and Local Church Ministries within the national setting of the United Church of Christ. Nurture for the Soul is a weekly webinar offering that shares practical, educational, innovative, and formational resources and engaging critical topics for local churches and people of faith. This webinar is produced by the Justice and Local Church Ministries of the United Church of Christ. We faithfully focus on care and education for the people of God. From culture and community organizing to congregational leadership, from worship and theology to resourcing small and rural churches, from ministry with youth and children to wide-ranging justice issues, featuring guest artists, authors, and key leaders. Nurture the Soul stays current to how the gospel is alive in this time. This is a space for connection, community, and nurture. Together, we can bring our church, our community, and the world together towards the world God imagines for all of us. Join us every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time for Nurture for the Soul, and look for special offerings from time to time as well. We are always producing opportunities to engage, and you can find a full list of upcoming digital programming offerings at ucc.org/events or any of our social media platforms. Friends, if these conversations move you, if what we're offering here helps, and if it enhances your ministry or even your soul, please consider donating towards the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by simply texting UCC to 41444. Once again, that's texting UCC to 41444. Your prayerful and financial support helps programs like this is essential for the works of the United Church of Christ. And in advance of your gifts and in advance of your continued support, I want to say thank you for walking with us on this journey. Let's get right into it. Today, we are starting a 4-part series on revitalizing church practices. Over the course of 4 sessions, we will delve into the deep topics of, one, this session, new church planning strategies for success, where we are going to explore the roadmap to establishing a thriving spiritual community. Next week, we're going to look at multiple streams of income through 501c3s, where we unearth the potential of leveraging your nonprofit status for diversified financial growth. The week after that, we're going to look at grants, navigating the waters, embarking on a guided journey through the complex currents of grant applications and acquisition of funds. And last but not least, the 4th part of this series, we will look at 4 entities engaging to empower through grant making, effective grant making, learning the keys to granting opportunities to foster impactful change. So that workshop will look at how do you effectively make grants so that you can have impactful change. Each episode will feature a panel of seasoned experts ready to share their wisdom and experience. On today's webinar, we will embark on a journey to breathe life into communities through new church plants. In this webinar, we will glean from the wisdom of our panelists as we explore the foundation of successful church planting. So who's with us today on our panels? We have 3 folks that are going to walk with us, that's going to share their story, and I'm going to quickly introduce them, but I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, ask them to introduce themselves after this. We have with us Reverend Nikki Collins, the lead coordinator of the 1001 New Worshiping Communities efforts by the Presbyterian Church USA. We also have Reverend Dr. Vanessa M. Brown, the founder and senior pastor of Rivers of Living Water, UCC of New York and of New Jersey. And last but certainly not least, we have Elder Vernon Richardson, the Chief Operations Officer at C3 Cares, a nurse-led primary care practice in Washington, D.C. He is also a founding member of the Community Church of Washington, D.C., UCC, and he serves as the Vice President of the Board of Directors for Empowerment Enterprise, the nonprofit arm of the church. I want to welcome each of you, and I want to personally thank you for answering the call that I made out for you to join this webinar. Thank you for your time today. It is graciously appreciated. And so let's jump right in. I did a brief intro of each of you, but I'm sure the audience want to hear from you more so than hearing from me around who you are. So let's jump right in. I'm going to ask if we can go in this order. Elder Vernon Richardson, if you would introduce yourself first, followed by Bishop Vanessa Brown, followed by Reverend Nikki Collins from the Presbyterian Church.
Hello, everyone. I am Elder Vernon Richardson. As Dr. Wade or Reverend Wade previously stated, I wear several different hats. I'm most proud to still serve the community church of Washington, D.C., not just as a member, but also as a member of the clergy team, also as a member of the church's board of directors as well. And just someone who, enjoys kind of participating in worship with my church family. So I don't know if there's a whole lot more to say about that, but hello and thank you all for having me.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Reverend Dr. Wade and the United Church of Christ. As Reverend Dr. Wade said, I am Reverend Dr. Vanessa Brown, and I am also a new duly consecrated bishop in the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, where our presiding bishop is Bishop Yvette Flunder. My area is the East Coast region of the fellowship, which consists of Maine to the DMV area. I consider myself a radical inclusionist, a social justice activist, a digital creator, and with also being the senior pastor, the lead pastor of Rivers of Living Water United Church of Christ in New York and New Jersey. And really quickly, my research and my academic interests live at the intersections of sexuality, social justice, and digital interactive media. And so I am very happy to be here with you all on this afternoon.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Wade and colleagues. It is great to be with you all. I'm honored to be a part of this panel. My name is Nikki Collins, and like was said, I'm the coordinator of 1001 New Worshiping Communities for the Presbyterian Church USA. I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I work with a team of amazing church planters who are scattered across the country, helping our network develop and grow and equip and train these leaders. And when I am not running to keep up with them, I am running to keep up with a yellow lab and a lot of children and bonus children in my life. So I'm grateful to be with you all today. Thanks for the invitation.
And once again, thank each of you for joining us today. Thank each of you panel members, and as well as our audience. Thank you all for taking time out of your life to be with us. You could have been anywhere, but you chose to be here. So we say thank you. So, new church plant strategies for success. I think it may be prudent for us to start with, let's look at what when we say success, what is a successful church plant? What does that look like? There's different models of churches, from house churches for churches that worship in bars, to churches that are agricultural based churches, to the traditional church with steeples and come in at a particular time on Sunday mornings to worship. But there is a vast array of what church looks like. And as we've seen post-COVID, there's a whole lot of online churches that now exist. And some folk are even moving to hybrid models where they're in person as well as online. So how are we looking at, from your words, and this is to any panel member, what do you see as a successful church? What does that mean?
Well, thank you for,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Elder.
Okay, so I think a successful church is a church that is Christ-centered and community-focused, right? So a church that appreciates and focuses on Jesus's ministry and worship, as well as doing Jesus's ministry outside of the four walls of the church, and doing so in a way to where lives are impacted. I think to me that is a successful church.
Thank you. Bishop Vernon?
I think that a successful church can be defined in many, many ways. And hopefully we don't define it by numbers and the number of people that we have in our congregation. That's one of the first things, because I know small churches that are successful, right? That don't have as many people, right? And I know large churches that are struggling. People just don't know they're struggling and they think that they're not. I want to say that the legitimacy of a church isn't in starting one. It's in its ability to survive what I consider to be a pruning season. And if it yields fruit after being cut back, that's a successful church. Has your church come back from feeling like it's dead from the cut? Any church planner can come around and gather people and have all of these people, but being someone's actual pastor only happens when you can survive the cut.
I think that's really cool insight, Vanessa. I think a successful church is one that is really deeply, prayerfully seeking to understand their unique call of God in their community, and that they are working to faithfully respond to it. And it is not a metric of numbers or anything else, except knowing what God has called this group of people to do and working to be faithful to do it where they are with what they have.
So what I'm hearing from you all is that there's 4 unique things. I'm hearing there's a vast array, but 4 things that we highlighted in this conversation. 1, being Christ-centered and community-focused, serving the community. That's 2. Thirdly, it's not based in numbers. How many butts and seats, how many folk attend, how many folk watch. And then 4th with that is a church that understands their call and strive to do the work. And then I heard a 5th one in there, one that goes through the purging period, the cutting period, a season where things may not pan out exactly how you want it, but you strive to move forward. You thrive in moving forward and manifesting the missional work that God has called you to. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. Thank you. I think that's a good grounding place. I know so often folk think that a successful church means the ABCs. You got attendance, you got a building, and you got cash flow. Now, those things are important, for anything to operate in you got to have money to pay and be able to do and operate. And if you have a building, some people say that's a good thing. Some people say it could be a burden. And attendance, having folk that can participate and help carry out the mission can be good, but those are not necessarily the bedrock for what it means to be successful, is what I'm hearing through this conversation. Another question I want to pose to you, Elder Vernon, you've been a part of a church, a new church start that started 13 years ago. You were a charter member of the church. You are a charter member of the church, was at the table when the church was created, founded, when it became a part of the United Church of Christ. Having been a part of a church for 13 years, that's a new church plant, what has been your experience in planting a church?
Wow. So as a charter member, what I found was no one had a set role in starting the church. I think, the pastor definitely was, in charge of kind of visioning and directing. And as members, we were really expected and blessed with the ability to pivot at a moment's notice, right? And I think with that being said, I think, my experience was one that was, being flexible, having to be flexible, having to be able to pivot at a moment's notice, understanding that this is, new. My pastor was a new pastor. A lot of us were new at church leadership. So being able to understand that the work was going to be dynamic and not static, and no one really had a set role. Even our pastor was able to really kind of shift focus as needed as well. So I think my experience has just been one of, allowing God to be God in those moments, not being so stubborn to where, we feel like everything has to fit in this particular box. Everything has to be done in this particular way. And so just really being able to pivot, be flexible, and really pay attention to the move and the voice of God in everything that you're doing, as it relates to planning the church.
Thank you for that. Bishop Vanessa, I'm going to come to you next because I think it's similar in line. We started with a layperson who helped to plant, but as a pastor that planted 2 churches, what has been the experience there? What has been your journey there as a planting pastor?
As a planting pastor, so Rivers of Living Water in New Jersey will be 10 years old in June of next year. So we're 9 now. Rivers of Living Water in New York is 16 years old. It will be 17 years old in April of next year. And we have had our highs and lows. We were not always United Church of Christ. As a matter of fact, our first 10 years started off without being a part of any denomination. And long story, but yeah, we started off without being part of any denomination. And we've had our highs and lows because that's when the ABCs you're looking for. You need that, right? You need denominational support or some kind of financial support, even if it's not a denomination. We didn't have a building. So it's been complicated because we still don't have a building. So it's been, having to move about, having to share space. We are known as Bethel Methodist, although we are United Church of Christ. So, coming to compromise with how we are going to actually do worship, what time we're going to do it, and how long we're going to have to do it for, right? But there's been a lot of joy also in church planting as well, right? Because you get to be on the ground, right? When the soil first goes into the ground. So, being with people, listening to people, having conversations, finding out if a church really belongs where you decided to plant it, because maybe it's not, right? Those are all things that you have to go through and you have to realize, you have to see, right? The joy in seeing people grow, seeing the church grow, and then sometimes the sorrow in the pruning process, right? Where people leave for whatever reason, not always for bad reasons, but for good reasons too, because they're going on maybe to perhaps go to seminary or maybe to start their own ministry. So there's been a lot of joy in that as well.
Thank you, Bishop. I want to do a quick follow-up question with you. I've talked to a lot of church planters and folk interested in planting churches, and there was something you just said that was key that I hear a lot. How did you discern, you and your launch team discern what was the best location? You said discerning if it's even, this is where it was supposed to be, where you planted it. Like, what was that? What was the tools? What did you come up with? How did you discern that?
So because Rivers is what I consider to be a radically inclusive church, right? Serving predominantly African-American people and predominantly LGBTQI, GNC, and all the other alphabets that go behind it, right? We needed to figure out what that was going to look like in the area that we chose. So Harlem was the area we chose. I think that we probably mainly chose it because I was from Harlem, born and raised, and a lot of the people that were helping to plant the church were from Harlem. Some people were actually from New Jersey as well in helping to plant the church. And so it's like, okay, where will we go? What is the best place for this? And this is a time where, LGBTQI is probably, I want to use this word, in fashion now, but it wasn't then, right? So people were not trying to hear a bunch of LGBTQI people sharing space or being in their neighborhood. So you had to work through all of those things, right? How can people get to the church? We're in an urban neighborhood. Are there trains? Are there buses? Everybody doesn't have a car. Like all of those things that we had to sit down and talk about. And that's why communication and having meetings and hearing other people's thoughts are very important. Because yes, I had a vision but I could not do anything without the feet, without the hands, without the eyes. Everybody had to come into this conversation saying what it is that they needed. What did we feel like the community needed? Because there's a bunch of churches in Harlem, Baptist, Presbyterian, Catholic, but what is going to be different and unique about this church and what it had to offer to this particular community? And the same way with New Jersey, both things were not the same, right? Although it's an urban area, although it was LGBTQI people, what exactly did Newark need in a church, right? As it related to LGBTQI, and was it going to be harder? Was it going to be easier, right? Because after we done been on after 10 years now, right? So like, is it going to be easier for us in New Jersey? Well, no, it wasn't, because the crowd is different, right? The people are different. So.
Thank you, Bishop Vanessa. Elder Vernon, I saw your hand up. Did you want to add to that? I'm coming right to you, Reverend Nikki, because you got some stuff I really want you to share. Elder Vernon, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I just think with that question, I also just wanted to say, you know, when CCWDC was starting, we actually looked at communities that we saw as having a need for like support. And so when we actually looked at starting the church, we went to a community called Ivy City, which was located in the northeastern quadrant of DC, because there were some churches in the area that really just focused on Sunday worship, right? And this was a community that experienced disparities in everything. And with us being Christ-centered but community-oriented, we're like, how can we go in and impact those lives? And we started outreach immediately with like food drives and things of that nature. And then we also found a moment where an opportunity where we had to pivot, because that ended up not being the community that we actually were housed in, but it remained a community that we continued to do outreach in. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Thank you for adding that. And I also see that Reverend Nikki put into the chat a resource tool called Neighborhood Exegesis, which is a tool that helps you to identify what's a good fit as relates to where you want to look, where do you want to land, where do you want to connect and do missional work. Reverend Nikki, thank you for that tool. But now I have a question for you. As I introduced, when I introduced you, spoke to the fact that you are the lead for the Presbyterian Church USA around coordinating the 1,001 Churches in 10 Years initiative. Thank you for being a friend of ours. Thank you for being in relationship with us. But tell us what y'all doing over there at the Presbyterian Church, and how did this come about? And tell us a little bit about the works, please.
I wish when back in 2010, 2012, when this movement was being imagined and prayed over, I was busy starting a new worshiping community in a coffee shop in Middle Georgia. So I wasn't part of the planning and conversations and design of this crazy goal of Presbyterians to start 1,001 new worshiping communities in 10 years. But I was watching it from a distance and have loved being able to join it at this stage in the movement. So we've been at it for 11 years, and we have started and supported over 750 new worshiping communities over the past 11 years in almost every state. We do not have one in Hawaii, but in almost every presbytery, and they look like just about anything you can imagine. You kind of listed off some possibilities earlier. Mine was in a coffee shop. We have others. We've got a CrossFit gym. Today, I just watched a video, rough cut, of one that has launched from a paddleboard shop outside Denver. 40% of our communities are communities of color, which is striking in an 89% white denomination. And most of those communities are communities of new immigrants. So we know that that is really where the church is growing in the U.S., is among immigrants who have come here, who have new ideas about what church can look like and bring a lot of things from their home countries. So that's been the most joyful part for me, is getting to know all of these new faces and make these new friends who are leading communities of really courageous people.
Follow-up question for you. What are some of the strategies that are in place to reach the goal to ensure success of that?
Yeah, so we committed a huge hunk of funding to this work. So we have a system of grants that are available to our communities and the presbyteries in which they are trying to build themselves. So there's funding that we've set aside. We've built a system of training and resources. We do an assessment program with new or discerning pastors to try to help them discern their own fit for the ministry and their own capacity to flourish in it, right? Or what they need to do so that they can flourish. Our hope is that once someone has started a new worshiping community, that they will want to continue to do that for 10 or 15 years and find the work to be something in which they can flourish. We have a network of about 100 coaches who can coach our leaders in multiple languages. They come from across the movement. And then we really think that one of the most important things we do is surround our leaders with a network of relationships. You know that starting a church is lonely and challenging work. And so we work really hard to make sure that the folks who are doing this work know that they are not doing it alone. So we provide a lot of relationship building.
You said something that I thought was pretty interesting, and it's a paradigm shift, I believe, of our time. You said hoping that individuals stay in this work for 10 to 15 years. Are you saying you don't expect them to die in the pulpit? That's the expectation, isn't it?
You mean die in the pulpit at the end of their ministry life, like in their 80s?
No, they're age-wise. Most folk that I've been in contact with from it's been a traditional understanding that you when you're a pastor for life, and not just in title, but in the work and role of pastoring. And retirement sometimes is 30, 40, 50 years. No,
now what I mean is serving in new worshiping communities for 10 or 15 years and not burning out after 4 or 5 and feeling like you have given everything you've got and there's nothing left. So we really want people to feel like they can flourish in the work of starting new churches.
Thank you so much for that. So many of churches that I've seen coming into fruition, especially in our denomination, the United Church of Christ, has been churches that have been untraditional in many cases. And when I say untraditional, I'm talking about theologically. And so I know that in this conversation, we have churches that are inclusive and progressive, churches that are social justice oriented, community oriented churches. So how do you maintain the authenticity of your church's message and principles, especially when expanding to a location that may not be accepting or may not be familiar with the message that you're giving? And this is open to any panelists to answer.
I think so. For me, my message is the church's message, and the church's message is my message. Whatever it is that we're saying, we're all saying it together. I think that the authenticity of a pastor's voice, and I'm going to speak from that perspective, comes from our own awareness. So my own awareness, because I'll speak in our statement, in my own awareness of what my core message is, right? So it's the message that I already live, right? It's the message that I live out. It's the message that drives my life, and it's the inspiration to the ministry. And for example, Noah had a message: it's going to rain. John the Baptist had a message: repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Jesus had a message: it's the kingdom. So our message is identified not just in what we put on paper, but it's also how we live, because we are living epistles. So that same message that we have on paper is the same message in which we try to live out. And so we try to maintain that by living what we say, what we've written down.
Can that be difficult when you're faced with trying to survive and trying to draw folk from the neighborhood and community, and then you may be labeled as this church that is politically driven, or a church that is seeking LGBTQI folk? Can that be difficult, or how do you navigate the difficulties, if it exists, that comes with being a voice of a fresh message that may not necessarily be present in that community?
It is difficult. But through that, what I have found out is that everybody is not going to eat the food that I serve. And that's okay. Everybody don't eat chitlins. Everybody don't eat hog maws. Everybody don't eat collard greens with, ham hocks in it. Some people need turkey meat, right? So you have to figure out how you're going to, approach the table. And is it going to be food for everybody at the table? And some people are going to be like, well, we don't eat meat at all. We're just vegetarians, right? So there's always going to be someone that doesn't agree, somebody that doesn't work, and as much as we say that we're inclusive, there's going to be some way that we're not, right? Because there's going to be some kind of, and so can we accommodate all of that? Right. And that when really looking at everything, because we try to throw a blanket over everything and we're going to try to be everything to everyone. And sometimes it's just not possible to be everything to everybody.
Thank you for your perspective there, Bishop. Anyone else want to chime in there? No pressure. Okay. The next question I have for this panel is, how do you engage and nurture new congregations, especially in those critical infancy stages of development where things are not crystallized, things are still in discernment? How would you recommend engaging and nurturing from a denominational perspective, a conference perspective, an association? What would be things that you would say, this is how you can engage and nurture?
I think fellowship is key, right? So I think, definitely Bible studies, and Bible studies where you're really honing in on kind of like the biblical basis of your vision, of your mission, your vision statement, everything, like just really honing in on, again, clear and consistent messaging, but also making the focus on identity, right? So the identity of the church, getting people not just engaged, but also invested in the ministry. And I think when you look at engagement, it has to be very intentional, that you are, kind of having opportunities for people to learn more about the ministry, learn more about members, learning more about, the denomination. So just really kind of merging fellowship with opportunities for learning and education, and fellowship within the wider body. And I think curiosity will really drive attendance in those moments as well. So
I think I want to add to what Elder Vernon said with regards to that. Absolutely, knowing the people, knowing the community, sparking their curiosity. But I think also what's important is that we focus what's in our immediate reach and what's in our immediate circle. And sometimes when new people come to the church, they are gleaning, but they also have things to offer. So I think it's important that we find out, what is it that you do? What is it that because, we got a whole plethora of things as a church that we want to give to people, but perhaps there's something that they want to give to us. And so that is, for me, that's been very important to find out from newcomers, particularly in the infancy stages of the church. What is it that you do? What is it that you have to offer? What is your area of interest? Because there might be something that they can provide that we haven't even thought of. Or there's something that we say we want to do, but we don't have the capacity to do that maybe they have the capacity to do.
I want to just add, in the same ways that you all are speaking about these things from the individual perspective, like that can zoom out and become structural too, right? In the way that the new church is connected to the conference or the presbytery or other existing congregations around them. And one of the things that we have seen in this movement is that the new communities that are in strong partnerships with healthy existing congregations have a lot more support and a stronger predictor of success, whatever that is, longevity at least, because they've got friends in ministry who can help them with payroll and figuring out insurance and just the technical logistical things of making church happen. So having a partnership with another sister congregation and also with your broader judicatory, right? Learning both what the larger and existing church has to offer the new community, but also what the new community feeds back and brings to the existing church, right? And so getting to know each other and being together from a conference perspective, like showing up with that new community helps to encourage those folks. It makes them not the other, but helps us recognize that we are us and doing ministry together. And that just increases our commitment to one another, which I think is key. Knowing that we've got friends, partners, and committed people around us to do the work together.
Wow. Thank y'all. Thank you all. Those were real pearls of wisdom that I think for folk who are listening, and a lot of the conversations I have with conference ministers, it can be very useful. So there's the perspective of the internal work of building the church, but then also the partners that stand with having those being key. So thank y'all for sharing your relative perspectives there. Now, here's the question of the hour. We've touched on it in various ways, but I'm going to ask it straight out, right? So what would each of you say from your perspective are the most effective strategies for successfully planting a church? Maybe it's one, maybe it's two, 3 max. But what, from your perspective, are the most effective things to do, the most effective ways of being, strategies for successfully planting a church?
I think the first thing in my perspective, and at least things that I have done in order to start, is first of all, to find out, to have interest meetings. I think that those are very important because you get the buy-in of the people, the community, about what it is, if they're interested. Knowing the people, knowing the community, making yourself visible, being accessible as much as possible that you can, not to burn yourself out, but you have to show up to where the people are. You want people to go. Before I started, let me say this, before I started, particularly to the church in New Jersey, I didn't just start. People had already known me. I'd already had a track record from being in New York, but it didn't matter. I still was new to that particular community, right? Even though people knew me. And so I decided that I was going to start with outreach. And that's what I did. I did not start a church first. I started outreach. I found out what the community needed, and then I started providing it. And then I started a church probably, so that was how I got people, because people are into volunteering. They want to do stuff for their community, right? And it had nothing to do with church. It had to do with, hey, I'm giving back. I am seeing to the needs of the people. I am, social justice, social work, whatever kind of work it was going to be, community driven. I want to be a part of this. And that's how I started to get people to say, hey, you have a church here? And it was like, yeah, I'm thinking about starting something. Are you interested? And that whole core group of people became my interest meeting people. And then they invited people. And then that's how the New Jersey church got started. So I think that, doing something outdoors, in terms of outreach and finding out what a community needs is very important.
CCWDC had a very interesting strategy, one that I think really led to a really, really successful plant. And that was, we actually established a task force, a joint task force. So we actually got our start as members of Covenant Baptist UCC. And as we were starting, we decided that we wanted to be very transparent and really focused on our partnership and our relationship with Covenant. And so we started a joint task force, the Alabama creeped out, with Covenant and CCWDC, where we had lay members, we had members of leadership to actually come together and look at launch strategies, look at how do we communicate the launch, how do we facilitate this launch, and how do we partner to ensure the success of CCWDC once launched. We even in that task force and beyond, we were able to get mentorship from the different leaders. So the trustee chair at Covenant actually did formal trainings with the new trustee board at Community and the diaconate board and so on and so forth. So definitely looking at opportunities to partner with existing and established ministries. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Like, look at opportunities for partnering and mentorship with established ministries.
I think my colleagues have said it all and really well. For us, I mean, it is really, the successful strategy is one that is embedded in the context and is relational. And it is deeply engaged in disciple formation. And that really undergirds anything and comes before worship or anything that looks churchy and is shaped churchy, but it is being in relationship with the folks where they are, who they are, and doing the work of forming disciples, which is really gritty and deeply engaged in very earthy movement. So for us, it's all about, it's not a model. It's about knowing your context and building relationships with people. That is what's successful.
Thank you. Thank you all for that. One thing that comes to mind, I remember talking with another church plant that happened in the Central Atlantic Conference. What they specifically did was they intentionally started a 501c3, not the church as the 501c3, but a 501c3 separate from the church. And that positioned them to be able to bring in resources that the church could not, as they did their missional work, to be able to go out and be the hands and feet feeding and being able to work with youth. That was a strategy that they did, and it lended resources that the church would not have had at the inception, drums and music equipment where they were using to train young people, that nonprofit was able to then say once they were finished, they were able to transition it over. So there are strategies and there are key things, but I think it's based in what I'm hearing everyone say: 1, mission; 2, relationships; and 3, being able to look at what the needs are that exist in the community that you're going in. Okay, thank y'all for that. We got some questions. We got questions, and I forgot to say earlier that if you had a question, you could literally hit the question and answer a little icon at the bottom, and then we could hear from, we'll be able to try to get to some of those questions in our time that we have. The first question that we have is, would the PCUSA coaches be available to other denominations, in particular UCC churches, or are there equivalent people in the UCC? I'm going to ask Reverend Nikki to answer that question. I will say response after that.
Our coaches would absolutely be honored to walk with you all and support you all. We have worked over the past few years to do International Coaching Federation certification for cohorts of our coaches every year. So they are well trained, and many of them have become credentialed with the ICF. And so I will put our coaching coordinator's email address in the chat, so you could reach out directly to him and he could help you find a coach that fits the context or whatever it is that you're looking for specific work on.
If you would also send me that in email, I would really be appreciative of it. We have at our denomination, United Church of Christ, the CASA grant, which is for congregations that's looking to renew or new church plants. And a part of that is a strategy, which you said similarly, Reverend Nikki. We have it's a process where folk have to go through an application, and once they're selected, they not only get funding that we offer. The first 2 years is $15,000 each year, and then the second and third and fourth year it's $20,000 $25,000 for the third year and $25,000 for the fourth year. It's a 4-year intentional cohort model. And with that, we also pair them with coaches if they are selected for that particular grant known as the CASA grant. We just closed that grant September 15th. So we will be looking to open it back up again in June of 2024, where the deadline will be September 15th of 2024. But we have seen very good, we've seen a lot of good work that has come from churches, in particular new church plants, not only having dollars, but having a coach to work with them and walk with them around SMART goals and budgets that they have set, and providing a sounding board for folk to think through thoughts. We currently have 18 churches in that particular model, that grant, and we're looking to add roughly 6 more this year. So we're excited about that. So Reverend Nikki, there may be some intentional partnership that we could do that I think could help to expand our work beyond those who are funded in the grant. I know we've provided some level of resources for folk who express interest in coaching, and we were able to get coaches for them. But if you have a whole plethora of at least 100 coaches, I think that's a partnership opportunity for us. And I don't think I would get in too much trouble from the executives of our denomination by saying, hey, let's talk, please. Thank you. The second question we have here is, how do we engage the youth and invite them to the table? This person is a future pastor, and they feel that we may need to bring the ministry to them, not expecting them to come to us and join where they fit in, where we see fit in particular. As a future youth pastor on the college campus, they're curious about this. Anybody have an answer for that? How do we engage the youth and invite them to the table, especially in new church plants?
I just like to say she's correct. We're going to have to go to them. And that's what we have done. And it's about, where are they? You know, the young people I know, they're going to brunch. I just had a young man who goes to my church. He was like, I'm going to see you once brunch is over. I'm going to come on by, you know, because that's what they do. So at the end of the day, we have to reimagine church. So if this is the demographic that you are looking for, and you know that they're not going to come to your church, then perhaps you're going to have a brunch somewhere with some good music and some good food and a homily that's like 10 minutes, because that's all, right? And some good music, right? So it's just a strategy, it's just a way. But like, if we're going to do it and we talk about these are the people that we want, then we got to go out there and do it. They're not coming.
Spent some time this summer with some Lutheran and Episcopal colleagues digging into the data about the spiritual questions and just the values of 19 to 29-year-olds or 15 to 29-year-olds, just to get to know who young people are, to see if we could then design a church based on their values and who they have expressed themselves to be. And we're playing around with this whole design model for that. But I think you're absolutely right, Danielle, in the question. We have to go be where they are. And then we have to turn over a lot of authority for shaping what grows, right? We can't go with the assumption that we are the experts in this. Our credentials mean nothing to young people, but showing up where they are and being engaged with their lives is the credibility that we have to build with them, and then giving them voice and shaping what then emerges as we seek to pass on a tradition that we love and has nurtured us. So look forward to sharing with you all when we get some of this research completed and the model that takes shape for you all to try it. If somebody is eager to try to build a ministry with young people, we built a model. We'll see if it works for you, or if you're curious about it.
We have one more question I want to tackle before we do a closing question for the panel. This question is from Giuliani. Pardon me if I pronounce your name incorrectly. Marionette has a population of 11,048 people as of 2021. Our church body is less than 20 people in regular attendance. One of the concerns is how we can grow and stand out in the community, especially when we have so many churches. How can we show we walk the walk more than just talking the talk? My husband and I are excellent exennials and a demographic that is sought after for churches. How do we stand out and appeal to our peers and a younger demographic? Thanks.
I don't know where Marionette is, but, demographics are very important when we talk about church and young people, young adults. And I think it's just very important to find out what they want. We can tell you 100 different things, but none of those things may be correct because we are not there. We don't know them. We're not situated in that place, but you are. You and your husband are. And you all can have think tanks. You all can have, interest meetings. You all can have all, some of those kind of things to find out if they even have an interest. And if they do, what kind of interest? How much, would they like to invest in church or not? I think that it would be up to you all to do that kind of strategic work to find out what the area of interest is, of this particular demographic that you're looking at.
Thank you. Here is the final question for this conversation. It went so fast. I'm like, wow, it's almost over already. The final question is this: can you share a significant story or learned experience from one of the church plants, one of your experience in church planting that greatly influenced your strategy? An experience that you had that you said, hey, this one right here, not only will this inform how I move forward as a planter, but this can also help others. Do you have any?
I'm going to share just a practice that was part of how we did worship in our new worship community that was in a coffee shop. But it looked like a coffee shop, right? There were no rows and pews and things like that. And we decided to stay with that for our worship time. So people sat around coffee shop tables for worship. And that lended itself to conversation. And so preaching became a conversation where everyone in the room proclaimed the gospel. And everyone in the room listened to someone with whom they were sitting eye to eye talk about how God is active in their life and in their world, and how this text that we have for the day helps interpret their life and inform and guide them. And so we all practice together every week, naming how God is at work in our lives and listening to the gospel in that context, and then listening to one another. And I think that is the core of discipleship. That is the core of evangelism. And that has changed my ability to listen to sermons anymore. And I really don't even like to write and preach them, because I want us to have this conversation where we're really listening to each other. And I think that has shaped me more than anything, is listening to those stories of people that we gathered with every week for worship.
The New York church started what I call chit chat and chew years and years ago, before people started doing it. The other thing, also being online with it, before we went into the pandemic, Rivers was already online, but we was using Periscope, which nobody uses anymore anyway. And these chit chat and chews and these wisdom and wonders we did with really young people and older people, and them being in conversation over food and something to drink, and music. Those are just powerful and transformative ways to keep the elders in the church connected, but also to keep the children connected as well. And then the chit chat and chews. What we did was chit chat and chews it wasn't always about, here is something that's very important. Just because you plant the church doesn't mean that you always have to be the face of it. I think that that's very important. And so we utilize community. So whatever the subject matter was that we were going to talk about, whether it was mental health, we brought into our morning service mental health providers, right? Over food, over drink, to talk about. These were very impactful strategies and ways for our church to move forward, for the community to know that we cared, even if they weren't a member of our church. Right. And then for also our parishioners to know that we cared about whatever the subject matter was going to be about.
I completely agree with Bishop Vanessa. Fellowship is a very, very important, not just tool, but also like a very important aspect of starting a new church. I think one of the things that I've learned is, we are conditioned to be in community. We're conditioned to be in fellowship with one another. And I think that is something that leads us to really like the basic needs, the basic wants of potential parishioners, right? And so I think just, having a very robust offering of fellowship opportunities, making sure that everyone from pastor to trustee to deacon to whoever is accessible, I think is also really important when when starting a new church plan as well. So if there's anything that I've learned in that process would be really, emphasizing community, emphasizing fellowship, and just, rolling with that as well.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's discussion. I hope that this discussion has provided each of you with useful information around strategies for effective church planting. Once again, I want to thank our panelists for today's webinar. Reverend Nikki Collins, thank you. Bishop Vanessa Brown, thank you. And Elder Vernon Richardson, thank you for giving us wisdom, pearls of wisdom that we can think about, that we can discern on, and even strategies for how we can, maneuver in bringing life to communities through church plants. Thank you so much. Remember that this is a 4-part series, everybody. Join us next week for our panel discussion on multiple streams of income through positioning your 501c3. We're going to be talking about how to utilize a 501c3 to access monies beyond pledges and tithes and offerings to be able to carry out the missional work that God has called your church to do beyond the 4 walls. As always, we are grateful for your presence, your gifts, and your questions. Thank you for being with us today and all along the way. Join us every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time for Nurturing the Soul, and look for special offerings from time to time as well. Again, we are always producing opportunities to engage, and you can find a full list of upcoming digital programming offerings at ucc.org/events or any of our social media platforms. And if you missed it upfront, please consider donating towards the annual fund of the United Church of Christ. That fund helps to make this type of programming possible. You can donate by simply texting UCC to 41444. Once again, UCC to 41444. Your prayerful and financial support helps programs like this in the essential work of the United Church of Christ. Thank you. Thank you. Let me give a word of blessing. God, we thank you for this moment of our gathering. I pray that something that was said, something that was heard, lights a passion in the hearts of your people to bring about your gospel, to bring about your love, to bring about a just world for all. I'm asking that the words that were shared, the stories that were shared, be a blessing. And not only a blessing, but a blessing that's embodied in hands and feet being placed to the pavement to create change in this world. I thank you for each of our panelists. I'm asking that you would bless them a double fold for their sacrifice on today. And I'm praying for each and every church that's opening in your name, asking that you would give them the grace, the resources, and the wisdom to be able to carry out the work. We bless you and we thank you. It's in the name of the one who set the captives free. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Siblings in Christ, if you were moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.